is what I'll do is when I send the companion notes either today or tomorrow, I'll send along the recording of this. It'll be a private recording, so this won't be up on YouTube or anything. It's through YouTube, but I won't be making this public. So that way, if anything sensitive gets talked about, we're still in a fairly small group, but you're welcome to share it with whoever the heck you like. All right, so a little bit more about what I do as a financial wellness coach. Probably the best way to think about specifically this class, and in a larger sense, what I do is to kind of think about what GPS does for you. So let's say you hop in your car, you turn on your GPS. GPS needs two pieces of information, right? What two pieces of information does GPS need?
Where you are.
And anybody else?
Where you're going.
Where you are and where you're going. So you'll see these 2 points play out as we talk about changes in people's lives. That's kind of it. That's my whole job, is to keep track of those 2 things. And one of them changes constantly, and one of them might not change hardly at all. What is super not important to GPS is where we've been. So if there was a way for me to tell GPS, like, hey, GPS, yesterday I was in Kaiser, Oregon, my GPS would be like, why are you telling me this? This is not important. I don't care, right? Because while where we have been is important to where we are now, it informs where we are now, the past is actually not super important to calculating the path between where we are now and where we want to go. So let's say you're driving along, you're following your GPS, and you make a wrong turn, or you choose to stop at the gas station. What would your GPS do for you?
Recalculate.
It'll recalculate, right? Right. So it's just going to keep getting you back on track. And that's my job. It's just to recalculate. And I think what people want when they come to us for either that they're considering a big change in their life or a big change is being thrust upon them, they want to know the right way to do something. And we can't give them that because that's not our jobs. First of all, it's not to direct people's lives, but it is important to realize that there is going to be a reroute. It's just going to happen. Nobody likes to hear it. Most of my clients go, I want to know the right way. Just tell me. It doesn't work like that. We're going to have a reroute. Something's going to change, good or bad. We're going to have to reroute at some point. Okay, similar scenario. You're driving along, you're following your GPS. And this time a tree fell on the road, or there's a car accident that's blocking up traffic. What would your GPS do for you? I'm just going to drink coffee till someone answers.
One thing it does is a lot of times the GPS will show where there's an accident and stuff, kind of ahead to warn you that it's going, but you know that you're going to have to take that detour until you get back on the main road again. It's going to keep rerouting every street that you have to turn on to, to go around that.
Yeah, Julie nailed it. So if it can't reroute you and it will look for other routes, it's going to at least tell you what's going on. That's also my job, right? So we are going to reroute. And it doesn't matter whether it's a choice that my client made or a choice that was made for them. As GPS, my job is just to reroute. I don't care if it's a choice that, like, they chose to stop at the gas station or a tree fell on the road. To me, it's all the same. So does this kind of help explain sort of like the purpose of the work that we do? Is this kind of like the GPS is sort of my overarching philosophy? Does that sort of help explain a little bit? So let's go ahead and jump into slides. You're going to be tiny little dots for me, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to hear you. So please, like I said, feel comfortable with speaking up. All right, hold on. Dang it. Last night I navigated to it and it was just blank. So that's because I was on the last one. Let's see how I do. So we're going to be using a couple words sort of interchangeably. You'll hear me using choice change almost interchangeably. And for the purposes of this class, they are also basically interchangeable. That's for the reasons that we just talked about, whether it's a choice that's being made for them or a choice that they are making, it kind of doesn't matter. Whether or not they're making the choice to make a change or not, it's going to come along with risks. And I think we've all seen that kind of in the work that we do. So this lesson is specifically aligned for case managers, advocates, community leaders, teachers, mentors, coaches, anybody who's trying to be of service of their community. But even if you're none of those things, even if you're attending this class and you are here for your own personal development, this is still for you. My language is just going to be pivoted towards case managers and folks like that. So please don't think that this isn't a class for you. It's just, it's still for you. And if you are a case manager, a mentor, advocate, it's still also for you, right? Like probably the best way to reteach the things that we learn is to implement them into our own lives. So I'm going to kind of ask you to look through this as with two different lenses, looking through the lens of being in service of your community and looking through the lens of being in service of your own life. So by the end of the session, you should be able to share with others a strategy for navigating through big choices, big changes, and identify some key conversational phrases and what they indicate. So what you will hear from other people that indicates that it's time to sort of use this structure or the strategy, guiding others to take ownership and finding their own actionable steps, and practice good decision-making with no risk. So our core values at Pacific Stoa is that we teach others to trust ourselves, we respect others, inherit resilience, and we foster autonomy and self-reliance. Everything in the curriculum is what's called trauma informed. So you'll hear me calling back to this as we definitely focus a lot on not traumatizing people who are already in crisis and teaching others how to truly trust themselves and be resilient. So this is the intellectual property clause, which this is being recorded, so you are welcome to review at your leisure if you want to take a little nap. Basically, it says that everything that we're going to talk about today is meant to be used for your own personal development and in service of your community. But if you are wanting to seek compensation for this or contracts, then we need to have a separate conversation about licensing. But this is meant to be taken directly today and used in the service of your community. So right alongside tools that you're already using. So in the blue squoval, which is, I don't know if I made that word or not, but I love it, squoval. In the blue squoval, you'll see indicators for what you're going to hear from the people that you're in service of that may indicate that they are approaching or being subjected to a big change. So you're going to hear, I don't know what to do next. This is happening so fast. I don't know what I'm doing. What would you do? Just tell me what to do, right? So these are people who are in a kind of crisis where they have had choices removed from them, or they're about to cross a big threshold, and they are scrambling. And that moment of crisis and panic, people, I'm saying all human beings, we don't make good decisions in that moment of crisis and panic. So this is what it sounds like when someone is reaching out. And you can hear echoes of like all different kinds of life experiences right here, like an unexpected pregnancy. This is a job change or getting fired or about to quit, a relationship starting or ending, housing status changing for, having a gigantic opportunity land in your lap. So it's not always negative things, but this can be like if someone has a gigantic opportunity, they don't know whether they take it or not. That's still a big change and it still has its own risk. So I don't want this to just be focused on negative, possible negative outcomes, but big positive changes are also potentially risky too. All right, so they are asking for your help, right? They are asking for, what they are asking for is a to-do list. What they think that they need is a checklist, ding, 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 ding. They want to know the right way, like I talked about with the GPS, and they are wanting to leverage your expertise. But this, for you, this is a trap. Don't fall in this trap, right? So if you give them your checklist, if you give them 12,000 resources, if you overwhelm them with things to do, people to call, stuff like that, it will backfire. And especially if we are giving someone the right way to do things, what actually happens typically is that we're wrong in some way. And that sucks for everybody, sucks for them, sucks for us. In giving someone a list of expectations or a bunch of expectations, even if that is specifically what they asked you for, you will be eroding their autonomy by giving them a list of restrictions or a list of expectations. We remove choices from the people that we're serving, and that immediately removes their autonomy. And in the end, they will have gained nothing, and they will, quote unquote, fail. This again is a trauma-informed environment, so we don't really do failure. They will fail themselves or feel like they have because they weren't able to keep with the restrictions that you gave them, even if that list or restriction was given out of love, right? Even if our intention is good to be of service of them, by overwhelming or giving someone a whole bunch of things to do, it feels like we're fixing it. And this is what comes from something called motivational interviewing, something called the writing reflex, is that our brains as helpers light up. We get on fire. We're just trying to fix things. In the attempt to do that, even though it's motivated by beautiful things, we're actually we're hindering the people that we serve. And once those people fail, they are unlikely to continue trying again. And the next time that a big choice or a big change comes up, they're probably going to shut down or make a choice based on being in a kind of hot state of being in a point of crisis. So I want to stop here because this is really, really important. The instinct that we have to help, to make things right, to fix is beautiful, but has some potential poison in it. So I want to stop here and I want to get some feedback. What are your observations so far?
So they are asking for the right way, and the right way is really needs to be tailored to them. Is that what you're saying?
That's what we're going to walk through those
They
slides,
have to
but yes.
discover it. They have to discover it, not I say, well, Hannah, what I think you need to do is, you didn't ask me, well, maybe you did, but what you're really needing from your question, according to what I hear you saying, is that I don't need you to tell me what to do. I need you to ask the questions.
Yep, precisely. So that's what the structure that we're going to talk about today. And I'm not going to call it a script because it's not a script. It is, we just had someone join. Welcome here in just a moment. What we don't want a scripted like worksheet that we need to be filling out. I don't have a single worksheet in my entire curriculum. What we want is the right kinds of questions to ask to help people navigate that path on their own. And that's what we'll start now. I just want to make sure that if anybody has any feedback or pushback about why this is a trap right here, is that we're clear on that. Welcome, Joy. We're glad you're here. So instead of getting out your checklist and getting right in there with fixing, we talked, I think, 2 months ago about the 3 kinds of empathy, and this is where cognitive empathy comes into play. Instead of answering their concerns, their very legitimate concerns with stuff that they can do, phone calls that they make people they can follow up with, I want you to kind of respond to them with another question. So how big is the potential impact of this choice, change, whatever? And we're asking them about the impact of it, not the cost. So I'll give you an example. Client couple, very young, both at pretty low paying jobs, but both really like crazy smart, like, and they know that they are, right? They know that these jobs are not worthy of them and they want more out of their life. And they have the potential, he's a photographer. He has the potential to buy a big fancy camera setup. Don't ask me because I'm not going to be able to tell you, for $3,000. So that's the cost of the big fancy setup. The potential impact is different. So when I asked how big is the potential impact of this purchase, they said the potential impact was huge. And for some people, the potential cost, the $3,000, is not huge. And for some of us it is, right? But for them, the impact, the change that it could make in their lives was huge. So that's what I want to hear. Is this a little impact or a big impact? Because we're going to respond differently. If the potential impact is big, these are typically low frequency, high risk choices and changes. This is starting or leaving a job, starting or leaving a relationship, purchasing a home, right? This is going from being housed to being unhoused, like and even if it seems totally obvious, right? Even if someone is approaching eviction, you still going to ask the question, how big is the potential impact of this change? Let them answer that question. Don't make the assumption for them. So these are low frequency, high risk choices and changes. And we're going to be, this is what we're talking about today, this big negative visualization tool. So we're going to spend the rest of it talking about this, but I want to touch on real quick that if they come up with like the potential impact of this choice or change is smaller, then these are typically high frequency, low risk choices. This is what kind of peanut butter we choose, right? This is the kind of choices that we make all day, every day. They're very low risk, very high frequency. And there's another tool for that. They're within the curriculum. We're not going to be talking about them today. The tiny trials game, values, risks. Is there any other ways? These are little negative visualization tools. They're good decision-making tools. So I want to make it super clear that what we're going to be talking about today is the big stuff. The little tools are for the little choices. The big tools are for the big choices. Okay, moving on. All right. So your role in this conversation with the person that you're in service of is to facilitate, ask for more questions, ask those open-ended questions, take notes, and stay client-centered. So stay focused that they are leading that conversation and be focused on asking questions that will lead to creative responses, and over again, making sure that they have ownership of this. Like these are their ideas, not ours. And so they get to have ownership over them. Your client's role is to talk and think. Typically, I don't ask my clients to take notes just because they should be just sort of spitballing, like getting it all out there. And they should be doing the majority of the talking. So negative visualization, not everybody has heard of this phrase, is not pessimism or negative thinking. It's an ancient Stoic practice, and there's other religions and philosophies in the world that use something similar, but I steal mine heavily from Stoicism. That's why my company is called Pacific Stoa. This is the practice of deliberately thinking about the worst possible outcomes of a given situation, and then the practitioner, in this case, that would be your client, could consider possible prevention and recovery steps. And all of this is done without taking any risk. And that's really critical because the practice of this, the exercise of this presents no risk whatsoever. Just thinking through it kind of sucks and people don't really like it sometimes, but it doesn't actually present any risk to their lives. So it's also called premeditatio malorum, which just says before is pre, meditatio is thinking, and malorum, bad stuff. So thinking ahead about bad stuff. What negative visualization will not do is provide us with a clear right or wrong answer. There is no black and white outcome here. We're not going to go through this process. It's going to spit out. This is an algorithm. It's not going to spit out the right answer. Calling back to our like staying client-centered and trauma-informed, and also appreciating that everybody's lives are full of complexity is like there is no right or wrong. The world doesn't give us that. Life is messy, complicated, and beautiful, and we do not get right or wrong very often in our lives. Negative visualization works well because it's low risk, but essentially we're just talking about it. It's conversational, scalable, so you can actually take this strategy and you can make it smaller, or you can really adapt it out depending on how long of a conversation you get to have, or like how deep you'll be going. It slows down the decision-making process without stopping it. Crisis and panic stop the decision-making process. We don't want to do that, but we do want to have some slowness. Slowness allows us to consider and think about things before we actually do. It will provide, in most cases, immediately actionable steps that, again, they get ownership of. It's going to build resilience and awareness, and it will be focusing on what I call a controllable obstacle. Because if they're not controllable, why are we spinning our wheels on them? We still haven't gotten to it. We're getting there, I promise. So before you begin the actual strategy, you'll be listening for these things. I'm thinking about quitting my job. That's a choice that someone's thinking about making. Or I just got fired. That's a choice that someone made for them. So you're just going to open them right up and sort of just start asking, what are your options, or what options do you have? So again, instead of telling them, we are letting them kind of put their heads on a swivel, giving them the opportunity to do that and begin to kind of think through their options. And typically, especially if someone's in crisis, you're going to hear them say, I don't have any options. It's okay. Just give them a minute. If they say, no, I don't have any options, just keep going with the process. You'll still pull things out of them. And all through this process, our brains people don't think in nice, neat little columns. So you're going to ask a question. You might get an answer to that question 5 minutes later, when it sort of like percolates around in their heads. Oh, I did think of another option. I could, right? So they're going to come up with maybe 2 to 75,000 options, right? Don't limit them. And you're going to want them to focus on one of those. So as we're not doing a this or that. So we're not doing Jiffy versus Skippy, Jif versus Skippy. We're not doing that. We're not doing this or that. So which one of these options would you like to start with is a great question to find out which one they want to go. And this is, again, us staying client-centered. And it doesn't matter, right? It's totally arbitrary which one they start with. And sometimes if they can't choose, you could ask a question like, well, which one of these is the tiniest option or the least likely? Because you're practicing this first time through, you're practicing and teaching them the question scaffold. Ideally, by the end of the conversation, if you've got 45 minutes, half an hour to talk with them, they will learn this scaffold and then they could duplicate it themselves, just as I'm hoping you'll be able to do too. So by, again, asking which one we are staying client directed, and we are proceeding with permission and consent, which is always, always, always important. So you're going to get it. So let's say, okay, let's pick on, anybody have a big choice that someone you are in service of is considering or is having made for them right now? Anything that we could play with? Okay. I have a client who's considering leaving an abusive partner. And I know that, and I'm choosing this one specifically because it's fraught with emotion and we want to take action immediately against this. And so I think this is a good way to practice the slowness on our side of things, on the coach side of things. So let's play with this. I'm not going to use her exact. We're just going to spitball with this scenario. So what are the worst possible outcomes of leaving your abusive partner? All right. And they're going to come up with a list of worst case scenarios and let them go. They're going to be little ones. There's going to be big ones. There's going to be ones that are totally unrealistic. Like there could be like, for this situation or some most abusive situations, like I'm not going to have any money. I don't have any resources. I don't know where to go. I'm not going to have a place to live. He's going to find me. His family's going to hate me. My family's going to hate me, right? All of these things, let him go. Just get it all out. Every single possible thing. So everything, like I won't have if I go right now, I won't even have clean laundry. Like that doesn't seem like it's super important, big picture, but that's super important to the person that we're talking to. Like not having clean laundry, that's important. So like, I don't know. Yeah, I can't, the car doesn't have any gas in it. We could run out of gas. So on and on and on. Exhaust all those worst case scenarios, large, small, serious, silly, let them run out, get them for where we're getting everything on the table, and let them know that this part sucks really bad. Say it, like, this hurts. I understand that even writing these down, you'll be the one writing, even talking through these things is scary, and this takes courage, but you can do this. Nothing that we're going to talk about today can hurt you. That's a phrase that I'll use quite a lot when I'm speaking with someone who's in crisis, is like, we're just talking here, right? We're just spitballing. Nothing here can hurt you. But it's important to kind of get these out, and they'll hold back. They'll do a couple. They don't know if they can trust you, but in their brain, they're thinking about 12,000 other worst case scenarios. So that's okay too. And this is your question over and over and over again. What else? What else? What else? What else? And you might think that you're going to sound repetitive, but they're not actually listening to us. And that's not a bad thing. Someone who's in crisis or someone who's being approached with a big choice, they are shut down. So you could ask the same question in exactly the same tone of voice over and over and over again. They're probably not going to notice. I do this a lot. I have never, ever in 5 years now, I've never had a client say to me, why do you keep asking me the same questions over and over again? Because they're not actually listening to me, and that's okay. They shouldn't be. All right, so we're looking at, so we've got our worst case scenarios. That's step one. Step two is we're going to have them evaluate the likelihood of this. So we had the choice or change, and then we had all of the worst case scenarios, and we're going to pick one of the worst case scenarios. So what is the likelihood of that happening? So let's say the worst case scenario was, I don't know if I'm going to have clean laundry if I leave. So what's the likelihood of you not having clean laundry? And it doesn't matter what scale they use. I could say like 50%. And this is not something we're ever going to double check. So this is not, we're not going to go. The mathematical likelihood of this actually happening is not important. What we are asking them is to kind of evaluate, we're inserting a little bit of reality here. So if the likelihood of this is 0%, it's okay for them to hear themselves say that. Right, even if it's a concern, even if it's weighing on them and it's worrisome, but the likelihood is very, very low, they need to hear themselves try to process through that. We're not going to tell them that, like, the likelihood of you having to worry about clean underpants is not a big deal. Like, that does not come off very well. That comes off like, suck it up. What we need to hear them say is like, I suppose, like, clean laundry, like the likelihood of that happening is pretty low. And you do this for each worst case scenario, or alternately, you could pick one at a time. It's just going to depend on how the conversation goes. So let's pause here. We're getting into the weeds with some decision making and worst case scenarios. So, so far as we've been talking, let me check the time real quick. So far, oh, brother. Okay. What aha moments or surprises have you folks had so far? And I'd like to hear from everybody, but I, of course, can't enforce that. But I'd like to kind of bring in some voices that aren't mine. I'm not going to pick on any, but I would like to hear your voices.
So, Hannah, quick question. Like, do we go through all the worst case scenarios before we ask the likelihood, or would it be like each worst case scenario and then ask the likelihood and then go to the next? Like, tell me more.
That you can go either way. I've found good success going either way. So I don't think that we as the coaches need to be super restrictive on how we proceed with that, because they don't know how the procedure works. So But if they're hyper focused on one thing, we're probably going to continue the whole process with just that one worst case scenario. But if seems like they're fairly detached from it, we're probably going to do likelihood for each one of the worst case scenarios and go down the line. So I don't feel comfortable directing that for you. I want to make sure that you are responsive to the people that you're working with. And it works great either way. So I don't know that you can screw this part up. So the pattern, which we'll keep going through, tends to sort of duplicate itself out pretty quickly. So does that sort of answer your questions, Mish? I can't hear you.
Yeah, yes, it does. Thanks.
Thank you. What other observations, questions, surprises have you guys had so far? Okay, let's move on. Okay. So
Just
go ahead,
before you go
Sumesh.
into the question, like, would you suggest this approach even with if somebody you know is discussing this with you, or would you like have somebody who's totally detached have this discussion rather?
Yes, you can have this discussion. You can lead someone down this pathway without them ever knowing you're doing it. It's very conversational. So I have, in fact, leveraged this scaffold with people that are not my clients, people who are dear to me. It doesn't take very much practice to get to that point, but yeah, this is an incredible conversational tool. So yeah, with people, you were talking about like family or friend relationships.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You could still even get consent throughout without them thinking that you are doing something clinical to them, right? Because you are, because of the conversational nature of this, like you could still like, can I ask a couple questions about that? I mean, that's a fantastic, any friend or family member would love to have you ask that. Like, of course they want that, right? So yeah, can be used in all kinds of conversations. My language today is very focused on our client coach or client mentor relationship, but absolutely go nuts with it. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
What other questions you guys have?
How do you go about, because I know with some of my clients, you know, they will just talk and talk and talk, and so that makes it not hard at all to get them to set goals or talk about other things that they're wanting help with. But there's some that really don't want to talk at all. You only get like 2 words out of each question that you might try to ask them. And so it's very hard to, you know, set goals or do other things. How would you approach this with them?
That the reluctance of the recalcitrance really indicates to me that we need to spend some more time building rapport, right? Like the conversation that we're talking about right here makes the assumption that we have at least some level of rapport. When it's time to build rapport, I go back to that GPS analogy. So then we can, like the goal setting conversation that we had last month, there's parts of that are definitely specifically designed just to build rapport. And thank you for that, Joy, because maybe this should be part of this class, is explaining that, like, although I have had good negative visual conversation with the waitress, like who I've never met before and will never see again, it still implies that there is some kind of rapport there. There needs to be a kind of trust that they have in you. Once, you know, let's say you're on your 12th meeting with this person and they're still very reluctant, it's okay to just ask about that. Like explain to them, like, my purpose here is to help you through the process of this big change. And I feel your resistance. Tell me what's going on there. It's okay to be honest about that with them. Like, I see you, like, I see that you are resistant or reluctant, and it's okay. And I know it's hard to trust people, right? But let them tell you what's going on. And I have a couple clients who are incredibly receptive, but not expressive at all. It doesn't mean they're not processing back there. It doesn't mean they don't understand. By one, building rapport, two, being honest about what you're seeing, and three, asking those incredibly good open-ended questions, you over time kind of get to know what's going on with them. So open-ended questions are superpowers. They will help you build rapport. They always will help you like gather more information. And this is hard for me. You'll see me drink coffee or drink something after I ask a question. Does anybody know why I do that?
Keep yourself from talking more.
That's it. Yeah. So that's a tactic that we could take, we ask a question and then we shut the hell up. I'm sorry, but ask a question, shut your mouth. I have, for a long time, I had a sticky note to the right of my computer that said, shut up. I don't need it anymore because I just drink my coffee, but when I get super caffeinated, but it is important that we ask those open-ended questions and then we let it go, because it's going to get uncomfortable, right? They're going to like, she's not talking, she's still drinking her coffee. So I don't want to like, this is not a manipulation, but it is like, some people need a really long time to process and then answer. And we need to give them that space. Jillian, I kind of like got super squishy with my answers, but does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It's just, kind of hard with my job, and so that's why I asked it, because we get that one, we have to get everything done in just the one home visit. And sometimes that doesn't build up rapport and stuff. And so all that paperwork needs to get done in that one home visit. Sometimes you could break it down into two if really need be. And then it's like the second half of the school year. It's like we go and get that second home visit in there. And so it just makes it a little bit, hard sometimes. And I just feel like I'm pressuring the families, trying to get stuff out of them. And that's not really where I'm wanting it to go.
No, it's not. And I appreciate that. In some of our environments, it's super transactional. And you're probably not going to have time to get into a negative visuals a conversation like this with that kind of transactional conversation. And there's something called paperwork trauma, right? So even if you're the one holding the form and you're asking them a litany of questions, that is not probably ever going to build the rapport. There are some ways to quickly build that rapport. Threaded throughout my curriculum is something called motivational interviewing. I would suggest, I don't teach it, I just use it. But there are fantastic practitioners here in Oregon. I would suggest that your agency find a teacher of motivational interviewing. It can be seen as a kind of manipulation, and there are people who teach it that way. But I would encourage, and we can have an offline conversation about that some other time. Motivational interviewing is a open-ended question philosophy. I'm familiar
with that one. They tell us, but sometimes it works. And then there's other people that I just feel like maybe that's just who they are,
It might just be who they are too.
And it's just like, but it makes you nervous when you're on that end, and you're like, is it something that I'm doing? Is there something, wrong here? But they just really don't speak much.
It's always okay to call yourself out on that, right? To say to the person that you're working with, this is uncomfortable and awkward. Like, I only have a limited amount of time for you, and that sucks. But this is we're all working within this process. So I'm going to ask you the questions, and I apologize if it makes you uncomfortable. And of course, you don't have to answer anything. So you can still build that kind of, and just being honest and just being a real person with them. if you're feeling nervous, you can say that too. They're real people too. I mean, I know that you're there and you have a job to do, and I know that it feels transactional. But it's okay to be open with that too. They will appreciate, even if you never see it, even if it never registers on their faces, they appreciate when people are honest with them. And then and this is where we're getting into more policy things, especially like an agency policy. Like, I wish I could work with all the agencies. We need to build in a system of the way that we can talk with the people that you're working with more frequently, Zoom, phone call, and over time. If agencies really want to accomplish their mission statements, the one-shot transactional meeting isn't good for anybody. But I appreciate that most agencies are moving money from one place to another, and they have to have that paperwork done. Never mind. We're going to have another conversation later. I know, and I know your boss too. So I know that the intention is caring and loving and trying to grow and evolve the community. But I also understand the restrictions of the process and system that you're within. I'll stop ranting. I'll stop. Okay. Somebody stop me before I'll put my note back up. Shut up, Hannah. Does anybody have any questions or comments before I move on? Okay, let's go. All right, so we've established likelihood. It does not matter what the actual likelihood is. And then we're going to ask them about control. So let's say, considering leaving my abusive partner, my worst case, one of my worst case scenarios is that I won't have clean laundry. The likelihood I've said is, I don't know, 50%. So how much control do you have over not having clean laundry? And again, they might right out of the gate say, I don't have any control of that, because that's what crisis looks like, is when they don't have control. It's okay. Let them sit and think for a second. And then they'll probably come up with, well, I suppose I could now, and you're taking notes, right? They're just spitballing, you're taking notes. So I suppose I could just do a load of laundry when I get home right now. Or like if you're simple, I could just start a load of laundry right now, right? So that I'm ready. And this may seem totally obvious from us, like, well, why don't you go start a load of laundry right now? Is not the way that we want to go with this. Like, we need them to have ownership over this. That's, again, the client directed and the trauma informed. We're not going to tell them what to do or even offer a suggestion, because most people are plenty bright and capable of coming up. Your job is to just pull that out of them. So how much control do you have over that? They could say, I have no control. I have 1 out of 10 control, that kind of a thing. So this is, again, their evaluation of how much control they have over that situation. And we're going to amplify this. We're going to use this information a little bit later. And just because they may not have control doesn't mean they shouldn't be focused on it. So even if let's say the likelihood is high, but the control is low, that's something that's happening to them. We should still be talking about it. So they still might have things that they can do, even if they don't have control. So if I don't pay my rent, my worst case scenario is going to be that I'm going to get evicted. How much control do I have over that happening? I have no control over that. If I don't pay my rent, I'm going to be evicted. So just because I don't have control over that process doesn't mean we don't need to be talking about it. So prevention. So the first thing that we're going to focus on is, so you've got to, nope, stop it. Actually, before I move on to step 4, we're a little after our halfway mark. So let's pause and take a break. We're going to take about 5 minutes. When you come back, I'd like you to, in chat or on voice, even, I'd like you to offer something like that this has brought up a situation that this is bringing to mind for you. So let's take 5 minutes, come right back at about 4 minutes till. So. Here's somebody coming back in. All righty, welcome back. Let's see, we got something going on in chats. Candace is asking, how can one repair the situation after making a suggestion or two that actually shuts the clients down, and how to reopen the conversation? Excellent question.
Thank you.
Just keep going, right? Just recognize that in yourself, like, oops, that was I shut that down. I stepped too far forward, right? And then just melt yourself back into the background, revert back to your open-ended questions, and recognize the signals that you got that told you that there was a shutdown happening, and use that for your own development. Like, no judgment here, like we're all in the process of learning, but just be like, oh, that didn't work, right? Like, so back to more listening, back to the open-ended questions, back to lots and lots of space, back to asking for consent, that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Can one call oneself out?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. You will score more points with the people that you're in service of by doing that than by, I can't imagine anybody here would like blame the other person for that interaction, but you can absolutely like, oh, I'm sorry. I see by your reaction that what I just said didn't help, right? And that's part of us being responsive to the people that we serve. So at the very least, call it out to yourself, again, without shame or judgment. But yeah, if you want to call it out to your, be a real human being to your to the person that you're serving, fantastic. So what sort of situations in your work have, if anything, have come to mind as we've been talking so far? We might be 1 minute early, so I might just shush for a minute. Everybody think contemplative thoughts.
There's that sticky note again.
Oh, shut up, Hannah. Okay. So this is a good time now, although you can always do it, is if anybody wants to share a situation in their work that that could have been served by this process, or that it's bringing to mind or reminding you of, or even something that we want to use as an exemplar. We can do that too.
May I ask another question?
Always.
Thank you. In order to build rapport, I like to share my vulnerabilities, and in an appropriate manner, in a situationally appropriate manner. But I struggle with, how do I make this not all about me, and yet make myself still giving the right amount of personal experience to say, hey, I've been here. Not that I know everything that's going on with you, but I've been here and I can relate.
I love this question. I hear this a lot when I'm beginning to work with coaches. So if I'm like taking somebody through the 40-hour masterclass, we spend a lot, especially at the beginning, talking about navigating through sharing our own personal experiences and using those as a teaching tool, and the goods and bads about that. And we are getting way off track here, so I'm going to only take a minute. It's important to have them understand that we understand and we see them and we can help. What's not important is that we give personal information. So especially if someone is new to working with someone else, working with the public, we only have our own personal experiences to fall back on. With enough time, we get a lot of a client of mine or someone else that I'm working with. We have a lot more of those experiences. So if it's important, if your own personal experience is important to share as a teaching tool, it's okay to anonymize that. right? To say someone I'm working with or someone I know has had this experience, and that takes you right out of it. It still offers the teaching aspect of it. And it makes you a totally neutral entity, and it makes it not about you. So it's kind of fibbing a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of, but it's not important that it's our story. It's because it's not about us. What's important about this particular scenario is that there's an element of this that will maybe help it feel like normalized, like, oh, this happens with other people. It's not just in your head, right? Like, so anonymizing our own stories or pulling from stories from others. But I'm not a super big fan about sharing my personal life with my clients. And depending on the population that you work with, it may be detrimental to them and you. And yeah, it's not, making it about me is not important. It's not about us. So it's okay to, does that kind of answer your question?
Absolutely.
Really briefly, having a friend
Thank you.
who's thinking, Sumesh says, having a friend is thinking of going back to her abusive. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Joy. Sumesh, can we use that as an example?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the example is so in your own head, you are working with someone, talking with someone who is thinking of going back to an abusive husband. So it sounds like a woman thinking about going back to her abusive husband. So of course, our instinct as fellow human beings will be like, oh my God, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, right? Screaming and yelling, you come with me, you're mine now, right? Right? You live with me now, right? That is the instinct that is built out of love, but not the right course of action, right? Is where we're probably going to do more harm than good. So the worst case scenario, you would get her a list of worst case scenarios. What's the worst possible outcomes if you go back to him? And again, recognizing that's, we're going back in time a little bit. We're recognizing that talking about this sucks, but it's okay. Nothing here can hurt you. Okay, so she's going to give a list of worst case scenarios. Sumesh, do you have an idea of something that she might give as a worst case scenario of going back?
Yep. Being abused again, getting hurt.
Okay.
Like being put down.
Okay.
What does she do? What does she tell her advocate about in terms of there's a case going on for the divorce? How does that get handled?
Okay. Ooh, Sumesh has lots of worst case scenarios. So can we just, and I'm making this choice, but you would allow your person to make this choice. So let's pick on being abused again. And the reason I'm picking that is because it's fairly emotionally fraught, and it feels really pokey and difficult to talk about, which is why I'm choosing it. So how much control do you have over him abusing you again? That is a really, that question is because he's in those relationships, the abused are made to feel like they are the source of their own abuse. So the response, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is really hard for them to say and really, really hard for us to hear. I have full control over whether or not he hits me again. That's even saying it makes my eyes water, right? So the reason I chose this is because I just want to be aware that our level of compassionate detachment here is critical, because when you hear someone say that, it's probably going to trigger, if you're a normal human being, it's going to trigger some feels, and be aware of that. So just write it down. I know it hurts. I know it sucks, but that is legitimate. If she says that, I don't know if that's something that your person would say, Sumesh, but, or they's like, I have no control over whether or not he hits me. Right. So again, write it down. This is more about them talking than finding a solution. So then we would evaluate, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Oh, we missed likelihood. What is the likelihood of that happening? Again, whatever system or rate, whatever scale that she wants to use, and whatever the answer is going to hurt her, hurt you, but you're both very durable. And we're just writing it down. So writing it down and moving on. So this is going to sound a little victim blamey, and this is where this gets a little bit crappy, excuse my language, but you might skip this question for this particular situation, because the question is, what are some ways that you could prevent that from happening? Maybe you wouldn't want to skip it, but this could get victim blamey real fast. And that's kind of why using this exact example, Sumesh, is hard, but really wonderful. What are some ways that you could prevent him from hitting you again? Is kind of icky, but not being there is a great way to prevent that from happening, right? And that may seem obvious to us, but she may need to hear that. But if the answer is something like, I need to just behave right, that is something, again, write it down. This is already happening in her head. This is nothing new for her, but this hurts really badly. So go ahead.
Question here. So see, this step 4 is right. So we are asking the worst case scenario, and then we are coming to prevention. So
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that for all the worst case scenarios, the prevention can be like not doing that, and then it just reinforces that not taking that decision itself. So I'm just worried about getting into that rabbit hole where every answer to that prevention just goes into not taking or not doing that at all. So in this case, it can be a little different, but I'm just taking any other case scenario, like make a decision to change a job or move a city, and then say, how can I prevent that? Like not move at all.
Not do that.
All the answers, yeah.
I would say that if you're hearing a lot of that kind of, not, I just won't do that, or I could just not do that, we probably need to break that worst case scenario down into some smaller worst case scenarios, right? Like, that's where I was getting real specific with the not having clean laundry is specific enough. Like prevention would be an actual step that I could take, like, but so like, he's going to hit me again. Maybe we need to break that down into smaller worst case scenarios. I'll have to go to the hospital. I'll have marks on my face. I'll be in pain. Like, because those are a little more manageable as we're getting to step 4 and step 5. So I think that's a fantastic question, Sumesh, because if we stay too big and too broad, and it's possible that we do that because we're uncomfortable or this really isn't great to talk about, whatever the topic is, but breaking it down further and further might lead us to further actionable small steps that can be taken quickly. Because everything, especially if this is a negative long-term change, everything is going to feel like it's huge. So it's okay if we're breaking it down further and further. Is that making sense?
Got it. So for me, I'm looking at it in terms, I may or may not recognize till I come to the step 4 that the question itself was not broad enough. So is it okay, like when I realize that this is where we are getting stuck, then go back to that original question and then break it down and then again come back and follow this process?
Yes, all of that. Yes, perfect. Yes. That's why I like calling this a scaffold and not a script, is because it's kind of a choose your own adventure, right? You understand this process in the back of your head. They don't. So they don't know that we need to go back to the worst case scenarios and break them down a little bit further. But because this is a conversational tool, they may never know. I mean, like, you could just re-ask the same question again. So tell me, like, tell me about this. You can even say, again, being with transparency, what are some ways what about that big bad thing? How could we break that down into smaller pieces? You could be transparent about the question scaffold that you're using too. Like, thank you for sharing with me. I'm enjoying understanding more about you. Can I ask a deeper question about this? And then we can begin to break it down a little bit further. So yeah, I think the big question that you're asking, like what happens if we begin to hear the same answer over and over again? Yeah, break it down. And you may spend an hour-long conversation talking about laundry not getting done, or emergency room visits, right? Or any number of things. So, and that's okay, because you're using a similar scaffold that can be duplicated out onto anything else in their life. So it's okay to go straight down. So, and talk about building rapport. You get that deeply down into talking about that with someone, and it's very likely that bonds you to them. Did I answer your question, Samesh?
Yes, thanks.
Beautiful. All right, so we're working on prevention now. So worst case scenario, and again, it doesn't matter where we start with this, totally random. And even if they don't have control, it's important to be thinking about prevention steps. So what are some things that I could do to prevent that? What are some ways you could prevent that from happening? Step 5, nobody likes this step. For step 5, you have to get into the mind space that the bad thing has happened. I've taught this class before, and we're not going to have time today, but sometimes in the class, we have time to actually run through a scenario. And the classes that I've taught before with bigger groups, I'll break you up into 2 teams, a prevention team and a recovery team. And I went in and I checked on the prevention team working on their scenario, and they were having a great time. I went in and checked on the recovery team, and they were pissed at me because they have to get into the mindset of whatever it was a theoretical business failing. So they didn't want to talk about recovery steps. So recovery sucks, but this is so important. So put on your imagination pants, and you're going to get right in there with them. So the worst has happened. Okay. You went back. Again, no accusation, no judgment. You went back and he hit you again. And now you are in the emergency room, or now you don't have a place to stay, or whatever that specific was. So for Samesh, we're getting super specific. You're back in the emergency room, or somebody noticed your black eye, whatever that thing was that was hurting them the most. How are you going to recover from this? Or what steps can you take to recover from that? I could, let's say, I'm not sure which example to go with now. So, because we have several of them now. So let's go fairly simple. I don't have any clean laundry, or don't have any clothing. How are you going to recover from that? Well, I could go to the clothing closet, or I could just wear what I'm wearing, or I could go to my friend's house and ask to do laundry there. So we're talking about recovery steps, but the more detailed you can get with your story about them going to that bad place, to the bad thing happening, the better this gets. Although I appreciate that this sucks really badly for everybody, for them and for you. Let's say I don't know what they would come up with, but now they're in the emergency room. They've been hit again. They're in the emergency room. What are you going to do to recover from this? Well, I could finally call the domestic violence advocate, or the IPV advocate. I could move. I could, and they're going to come up again. It does not matter what they say. They're going to come up with some silly stuff and some powerful stuff, and you're just writing it all down, right? So, recovery. Make the worst case scenario present tense. It has happened. And this hurts a lot, but this is the point of negative visualization, is that we are practicing this worst case scenario and practicing living in it without it actually happening. So you can say again and again and again, we're just talking. This is just a conversation. Nothing here can hurt you. We're practicing building resilience with them by thinking about it ahead of time. Because most of the time when our brains are presented with the opportunity to think about something bad, we rebel. Nope, absolutely not. This is kind of riding the crest of that in an environment that can't hurt them. They're talking with you. You're safe right now. Here we are. We're just talking about this. And it's typically the thinking through it is not as bad as they thought it would be. And this usually is feedback you'll get later, like not in that moment. we're using courage and building resilience and reminding them that nothing could hurt them. And at any point, and this is sometimes where this happens, you can just stop the conversation, right? So staying trauma informed is really critical. And I don't know what that looks like in each individual conversation between you and whoever you're talking to. But if it's now traumatizing to them, you could stop this, or just stop the whole conversation. They don't know, again, that you're using a scaffold. And if they say stop, you stop. The conversation ends. You talk about something else, or everybody goes away for a little while. So we are doing this in a safe environment, but this also does have the potential to traumatize. So be sensitive, and take your time, go slow. So what you'll end up with, and what I should have pulled one out. What I typically end up with is a hot mess, right? Like, so my notes in a conversation like this do not have nice, neat little columns. And I almost don't even provide a worksheet for that anymore. I might still have one somewhere. So expect that you're going to have because like I said, people bounce around. I'm like, oh, I just thought of another option, which was the very first thing we talked about. Like, I just thought of something else I could do. Oh, okay, let's talk about that. So now what you usually end up with is a list of prevention steps and a list of recovery steps. So review those with your person. And then ask the question, could some of your prevention steps be recovery steps? And could some of your recovery steps be prevention steps? And now they're cogitating, right? Now they're thinking like, oh, I could actually, that recovery step would actually make a pretty good prevention step. And by using the languages of prevention and recovery over and over and over and over and over again, you're teaching them this strategy. So review all the prevention and recovery steps of this particular worst case scenario. Which steps could be both? Which steps could you do right now? Powerful question. We're looking for the low hanging fruit. Like, I suppose I suppose I could start a load of laundry, right? Like that kind of thing. Or I suppose I could fill out this paperwork real quick. I'll fill out half of this paperwork. And again, it's critical that we are not giving them options here. They are taking ownership of them because they've come up with every single idea so far. Which steps could you start right now? And then if this is the way the conversation is gone, you could pick another worst case scenario and repeat. Or if the time is short, then you can just, if you have an opportunity to set up another time to talk, you can repeat this again and again and again, or you can literally share with them what you've told them. And I'm going to give you a shorthand here in a minute, but step 8, you're still in the conversation with the person and you're going to offer some reflections. And reflections, I've asked you for reflections several times so far. Reflections are critical because that helps to reinforce the learning process that someone is going through. And it gives them ownership over this. So reinforces awareness and perspective, provides motivational learning and enjoy the process of learning. And it allows them the opportunity to engage in some experimentation. And in some cases, it goes so far as it feels like it's a game. The small negative visualization tools that I teased at the beginning, those are literally, I teach them as games. So some good reflections are, what surprised you about what we've talked about? Does anybody recognize this? I asked you this exact question earlier. And again, see what I just did? I just took a drink. I just do it automatically now. What aha moment did you have while we were talking? And this one, I will give to you, but I want you to proceed with caution with this. This takes a high level of rapport with whoever you're talking to, and it helps if they have a sense of humor. And this is probably not appropriate for someone in a situation as dire as the example that Sumesh has given us. So the question is this: has anyone in the history of time who is dumber than you, less resourceful than you, and less connected than you figured out something like this, or survived something like this? This requires some humor because typically people will laugh. which is what we want, right? This is a perspective change. And like, yes, people have figured this out before, so I can probably do this. These other reflections can be used for pretty much anybody. So let's talk about ways that you can modify this. So you could drop likelihood and control, right? You can just cut right from the worst case scenario to prevention and recovery. You can, that is, if you don't have much time, a really, really simple way to do negative visualization in a really fast, really informal way. So you could just ask, what's the worst thing that could happen if this happens? And that might give you one or two things. How could you prevent that? How could you recover from that if it does happen? So Sumesh asked earlier about like, how does like this is a conversation outside of our practice. Like you could definitely like, this could be a two ships passing the night kind of conversation. This is real close to the conversation that I had with a waitress, right? Like she probably walked away with lots of things to think about, which is exactly what I wanted, right? Like she's going to go do that work in her head, right? So these questions are powerful, but they don't have to be super in-depth as we've talked about them. The super in-depth model is fantastic if you have time, and it will result in a lot of usually tears, almost regardless of the situation. All right, we don't have time for the exercise. So let's, oh, Joy says speed up. Sorry, Joy. I didn't see that till just now. So I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to ask some open-ended questions. So if you could give me like one thing that has resonated with you in the time that we've been talking.
I think the making it a scalable conversation and making sure it's low risk, making sure that the client understands that it is a safe space, and so it is low risk to make sure to have the question be answered by them, the negative visualization, but and they can extrapolate, you know, okay, well, this could be high risk if it happens, but right here, right now, I'm safe.
And we're practicing.
Yeah. And that's, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Candace. Jolene, Sumesh, Michelle, anything that's been resonating with you, if anything? I don't know if Joy is still here, but.
I like the way the worst case scenario is used to help the person visualize. The conversation can easily go in terms of why do you want to do it, and it brings about the positive reasons why you want to do it, and it just re-emphasizes why you should be doing it instead of looking at what is the impact that can actually cause you, and then it doesn't help the person weigh it correctly in terms of if it is the right decision or not. Because when you're making a decision, it's all about looking at positives and then thinking positively and hoping that things will work out.
So we didn't talk about this much at all, but this is a good counterpoint, not a good replacement to positive visualization, which I think is important, but I'm definitely not your girl for that. Like I am way more on the negative visualization side of things. I like positive visualization for the hope and optimism as it gives us, and it is important to goal setting. And when we talked about it last month, like the first part of the goal setting strategy is all positive visualization. Negative visualization, I think, gives us way more actionable things to do, and it's way more long-term positive. That doesn't seem to make any sense, but yeah, I don't want to like completely bag on positive visualization, but I think that this is a good parallel, a good combo with a positive visualization. we cut out a little bit in your talk there, but is that kind of what you were saying, Sumesh?
Yeah, and also I'm trying to see, how this easily connects to the next session, which you were talking about in terms of procrastination, and then how do you use this, directly take it to, what is the impact, long-term impact, short-term impact. So yeah, I love the way this is.
Yep. Thank you. Sumesh is on to me. These are all connected. Michelle or Joy, if you have anything to share about things that really resonated or squared up for you, this is no expectation. I just want to make sure you have space. Okay, next question. What do you need clarification on, if anything?
Hannah, if you have like an example of like how you take notes, which can like maybe a sample of it, because I'm trying to see how this conversation comes on paper, like maybe
let me
who's writing it down or I writing it down, and then how we put it across.
Yeah, certainly everybody's notes on this look different. And the reason that I would show you my notes is only to show you how messy they are. Like that we have a structure sort of that we're going for here, but the conversations, because they're conversations between human beings, don't flow like that structure. So I don't want the expectation to be like, it's going to be question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. We're not filling out a form here. So I will look in my notes and find a good example, and I'll try to include that with the companion notes that I sent along to you with the recording today or tomorrow. But yeah, Sumesh, just the reason I made that face is because I'm like, oh no, I don't know if you actually want to see my notes. I'll anonymize it, of course. But my handwriting is not fantastic. I'll be really honest with you, but I will include it just for transparency. You got it. Anything else you need clarification on, Sumesh, or anybody else really? Okay. So we're pushing time. I always have extra time after, so I am welcome to stay as long as you guys want to, but I'm going to put a couple of things into chat. First, I'm going to ask you to fill out an exit slip. These exit slips are super, super, super helpful for me in my development of these courses. So the exit slip takes about 2 minutes, doesn't have to be done right now, but if you want to pull this open into another tab. Next class is, putting that in there. The next class is, like I said, on procrastination, and that is January 13th at the same time. These are again where we're starting with the tiered ticketing. So I encourage you to get tickets as soon as you can. And I am
a helpful thing is I follow you through the Eventbrite, so I get notification in my email when there's an available training coming up, and then I register like right away.
I know you do. You and Candace are like stalking me. You guys know when I'm working.
So that's helpful to be able to kind of follow somebody. So if there's something that you're interested in, you get a notification right away that the training is available. I take the opportunity of the free trainings just because our budget sometimes doesn't really allow us for some other
that's
opportunities. But yeah, I'm always on it.
Yeah, you are. I know that, like, I've now figured out that if like I'm working until late in the night and I'm posting those things, I'm like, you all can see that because you get notifications. I'm like, uh-oh, they know that I'm working at 1 o'clock in the morning. So
yeah, I have a habit of checking my email and a work email, it's just a habit.
I totally appreciate that. And my life is my work. So, and that's just, it's not, well, I know we get talked to a lot about boundaries and self-care, but 1 o'clock in the morning is sometimes where my brain is working the best, and it's my business. So unlike work, I'm not clocking in and out. So I appreciate that we have covered a bunch of stuff today, and that this usually takes some practice. So I'm going to put into chat the link to put yourself on my calendar. So this is a part of this class. So there's no charge for this extra session. But this would be a good time for us to practice one-on-one with the tools that we've talked about today. If you can put yourself on my calendar before the 17th, I just forgot what it was, 13th, before January 13th, that works pretty well. So then we can be having the class today, working on something one-on-one, and then procrastination class and repeating the process again and again. So I'll encourage you to do that. That's my pleasure. I like working through these scenarios. So that is something that I would like. So
I'm excited for the next class because I can't even speak today, but I'm definitely looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. Procrastination is one of my favorite topics. I am a recovering procrastinator. We'll talk about it at length. It's one of those things that we all think that we're all the only person that deals with. Everybody else has their act together. Oh no. In some way, we're all procrastinating. So it's not a personality defect. There's a reason that we procrastinate. So I want to be respectful of your time, but this is a really good opportunity. If you have further questions that you want to share with me, share with the group, that we can continue talking. I'm made out of time for another. I just do what my calendar tells me to do. What is my calendar going to tell me to do next? I'm made out of time for about the next 20 minutes. So I'm super easy peasy. So, but if you need to go, please go with our, thank you for being here. I am so glad. Oh, please invite colleagues. These classes can get a bit bigger and still retain some of the conversational aspects. So
I always share the information with my colleagues here at
Arches.
So
yeah, and I know you've got that Breezy and Cheyenne.
Cheyenne isn't with the agency anymore. She went back to school.
Darn her. I think you've told me that before. All right, that's not allowed, but okay, whatever. Okay, so anybody have anything in particular? Any feedback, any pushback? Ooh, anybody have any pushback? I'd like that. Is this what you thought it was going to be? No comments.
Yeah, I do gotta go, Hannah.
Okay.
But today though, but I have a home visit to do in a little bit.
Thank you for being here, Joylene. It's always good to see your face. Everybody's submission Candace quietly doing what I asked them to do.
Actually, I had a question about how to get to the chat. I know how to post a question, but I was going to ask that mechanics question later.
Okay. When is our next appointment?
No,
Never mind,
I mean,
Oh.
after everybody hangs up today,
Oh,
before I let you go.
well, I mean, okay. Sumesh, did you have feedback
No,
or
Hannah.
pushback? Or?
Yeah, I just signed up for the next course, so I'll see you soon.
Looking forward to it, and I hope to find a time that we can schedule a time that we can run through some more specific scenarios and practice, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Bye. Bye,
Joy,
Candace.
are you
Bye,
still
have a
with
good one.
us? I think she left. She may not have disconnected. Just to kick her out to there. Okay, you got a question about mechanics?
Yes, I'm doing the meeting through my cell phone, and I am trying to figure out where I have the row of stuff at the bottom, which is mute, stop video, share, participants, and ... more. But no, I don't want to say speed up.
Maybe that's what Joy
and-
did.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking for the place to find what you've written in the chat.
So if you like flick down from the top of the screen, does that pull up another menu?
No, it pulls up all the settings like Wi-Fi and volume and Bluetooth.
And if you go to ... more, it doesn't give you the option for chat?
It gives me the option to
Boy,
no.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. It gives me the emojis and ... but it gives me a
Publish
whole
it.
bunch more emojis.